In 1883, Fred Harvey walked into his restaurant in Raton, New Mexico, and found every single waiter drunk and disorderly. Again. So he fired them all on the spot. Then he did something that would change the American West forever. He replaced every one of those rowdy men with young women. Not just any women, educated, respectable women from the East Coast, recruited specifically to work as waitresses in the wildest towns of the frontier. They were called the Harvey Girls. And between 1883 and the 1950s, approximately 100,000 of them would travel west to work in restaurants along the railroad. They served 4-course meals in under 30 minutes. They brought refinement to cattle towns and mining camps, and over 50,000 of them would marry and settle permanently in the West, literally helping to populate the frontier. This is their story. Not the Hollywood version with Judy Garland singing show tunes. This is the real story of young women who left comfortable homes for 12-hour shifts, strict curfews, and the adventure of a lifetime in a land where people said there were no ladies west of Dodge City and no women west of Albuquerque. But to understand the Harvey Girls, you first have to understand the man who created them. And that requires going back to January 1876, when a 37-year-old English immigrant named Fred Harvey took over a 20-seat lunchroom at the Santa Fe Depot in Topeka, Kansas. At that time, eating on the railroad was a nightmare. Passengers had to grab whatever food they could find at brief stops along the route. Most of it was inedible. Rancid meat, stale coffee, questionable stew that might have been recycled from the previous train's uneaten meals. Some cafe owners even colluded with train crews in an ingenious scam. Passengers would pay 50 cents in advance for a meal. Food would be placed in front of them. Then, before they could take more than a bite or two, the train whistle would blow. Afraid of being left behind, passengers would abandon their plates and run for the train. The cafe would serve that same food to the next trainload of victims. Fred Harvey had experienced this misery firsthand while working as a freight agent. He had watched passengers suffer through terrible food and worse service. He knew there was a better way. When he opened that modest lunchroom in Topeka in January 1876, he did something radical. He ordered entirely new silverware, stemware, and dishes. He insisted on imported linens. He served fresh, well-prepared food at reasonable prices. He maintained impeccable cleanliness. Passengers were stunned. This wasn't just better than railroad food. This was better than most restaurants back east. Word spread quickly. Within 2 years, Harvey had opened his first hotel restaurant in Florence, Kansas in 1878. By the early 1880s, he operated 17 restaurants along the Santa Fe's main line. By 1891, that number had grown to 15 Harvey House restaurants, with more opening constantly. The deal Harvey struck with the railroad was brilliant in its simplicity. The Santa Fe provided the buildings and transported all food, furnishings, and employees free of charge. Harvey maintained complete control over operations and kept all the profits. It was sealed with a handshake, no written contract, just mutual trust and respect between Harvey and Railroad Superintendent Charles Morse. By the late 1880s, there was a Harvey House every 100 miles along the Santa Fe line, the exact distance trains needed to travel before refueling and loading water. When trains stopped for 30 minutes, passengers could enjoy a proper meal. The system was synchronized perfectly. Train conductors would telegraph ahead with the number of passengers and their meal orders. By the time the train pulled in, the Harvey House staff had everything ready. Harvey's Restaurants became America's first restaurant chain. Long before McDonald's, long before any modern franchise system existed, Meals by Fred Harvey became the railroad's marketing slogan. It was a guarantee of quality that travelers could count on from Kansas to California. But quality came with Harvey's famously high standards. He was known for surprise inspections at his establishments. Legend has it that during one visit to the Las Vegas Harvey House, he was so displeased that he literally threw the manager and all the dining room equipment out onto the train platform. He mandated that all men dining in Harvey houses must wear coats. If a customer arrived without one, dark alpaca coats were provided at the door. He insisted on perfect table settings, imported linens, fine china often personalized with the Fred Harvey name, silver tableware, crystal glassware. Nothing could be mediocre, not the food, not the service, not the presentation. The problem? Men. Harvey's male waitstaff in the remote West were, to put it mildly, unreliable. They showed up drunk, they got into fistfights, they simply didn't show up at all. In frontier towns filled with saloons and temptation, keeping a stable male workforce was nearly impossible. Everything changed in 1883 in Raton, New Mexico. After yet another drunken brawl by his waiters, Harvey fired the entire staff. His newly hired manager, Tom Gable, suggested something unprecedented: hire women instead. Women, Gable argued, didn't get liquored up and go on tiers. They wouldn't have knife fights. They were more reliable, more courteous, and frankly, the rough cowboys and railroad men would behave better in their presence. Harvey embraced the idea immediately. He placed advertisements in Eastern and Midwestern newspapers. Wanted. Young women, 18 to 30 years of age, of good moral character, attractive and intelligent, as waitresses in Harvey eating houses on the Santa Fe Railroad in the West. Wages $17.50 per month with room and board. Liberal tips customary. Experience not necessary. Write Fred Harvey, Union Depot, Kansas City, Missouri. The response was overwhelming. At a time when respectable women had few options for employment beyond teaching or nursing, the opportunity Harvey offered was revolutionary. $17.50 per month, equivalent to about $3,000 in today's money, plus free room, board, uniforms, and the chance to travel west and see the frontier. Young women came from farms and small towns across the Midwest and East Coast. Over 45% were from rural America. Many had never been more than a few miles from home. The idea of boarding a train and traveling hundreds of miles to work in the Wild West was both terrifying and thrilling. When a woman was accepted, and Harvey screened them carefully, she usually had just 24 hours to say goodbye to her family and report for training. Most training took place in Newton, Kansas, or at the Topeka location. It lasted about 2 weeks, and it was rigorous. The Harvey way had to be learned precisely: how to carry multiple plates without spilling, how to serve a 4-course meal in under 30 minutes, how to read the cup code, a system where the position of a cup on a saucer indicated what drink the customer had ordered. Coffee cup handle at 2 o'clock meant coffee. At 6 o'clock meant iced tea. At 9 o'clock meant hot tea. At 12 o'clock meant milk. The women learned to set tables with military precision. Silverware had to be placed exactly. Glasses had to be spotless. Linens had to be perfectly pressed. Nothing escaped Harvey's standards, and those standards were drilled into every Harvey girl until they became second nature. The uniform served multiple purposes. It was modest and professional. It made the women instantly recognizable. It sent a clear message. These were respectable young ladies, not saloon girls. At a time when the word waitress carried negative connotations and was often associated with prostitution, the Harvey girl uniform and strict rules elevated the profession, and the rules were strict. Very strict. Harvey girls signed 6-month contracts, later expanded to 12 months, agreeing to specific terms they would not marry during their contract period. If they did, they forfeited half their pay. They would live in company-provided dormitories, supervised by a house matron. They would observe a 10 o'clock curfew. They would not wear makeup or jewelry while working. They would not chew gum. They would conduct themselves as ladies at all times. The dormitories were described as beautiful and well-kept rooms, a marked improvement over the boarding houses most young working women could afford. House matrons enforced the rules, but also provided protection and guidance. For parents back east, worried about their daughters venturing into the Wild West, these safeguards were essential reassurances. The work was exhausting. Harvey Girls typically worked 12-hour shifts 6 days a week. They served at least 2 meals per day, sometimes 3, as trains arrived throughout the day. When a train pulled into the station, a white-coated Harvey House staff member would hit a brass gong outside the entrance, announcing to passengers where to come inside. The Harvey Girls were ready. Tables were set. Food was prepared. As passengers flooded in, the women moved with practiced efficiency. Trays were heavy. Dining rooms were crowded and chaotic. Passengers ate quickly, knowing they had limited time before the train departed. Spills happened. Dishes broke. Customers could be demanding or rude. But Harvey Girls were trained to maintain composure, smile genuinely regardless of circumstances, and provide impeccable service under pressure. They could never speak to another Harvey Girl in the presence of customers. Every action had to reflect the Harvey standard of excellence. Between trains, there was cleaning. Endless cleaning. Tables had to be reset, floors swept, linens changed, dishes washed, Harvey houses sparkled. That was non-negotiable. But the job also offered remarkable benefits beyond the salary. Harvey Girls received free transportation anywhere along the Santa Fe line during their vacations. Many used this opportunity to explore California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, regions they'd only read about in newspapers. Some visited the Grand Canyon, others went to Los Angeles or San Francisco. For women interested in higher education, Harvey houses accommodated them. Work schedules could be adjusted so women could attend classes at local colleges. It wasn't easy to work full-time and be a full-time student, but many Harvey Girls graduated from the University of New Mexico and other institutions with degrees that launched professional careers beyond waitressing. And then there were the men. Oh, the men. In remote frontier towns where women were scarce, the arrival of Harvey Girls created a sensation. Cowboys, ranchers, railroad workers, miners, merchants, attorneys, men from every walk of frontier life suddenly had access to educated, attractive, respectable young women. The Harvey Girls became known as the Belles of the West. Romance was inevitable. Despite the strict no-marriage clause in contracts and rules prohibiting male employees from dating the staff, courtships flourished. Men would linger over coffee just to talk with a particular Harvey Girl. They'd return day after day, ordering meals they didn't need, just for a chance at conversation. The statistics tell the story. According to a 1948 article in the American Weekly, between 1883 and 1905 alone, 8,260 Harvey Girls married. Some sources estimate that over 50,000 Harvey Girls eventually married and settled in the West over the full span of the program. They married railroad engineers and station agents. They married ranchers and cowboys. They married local businessmen, miners, fellow Harvey House employees, chefs, busboys, clerks, and cooks. Legend has it that by the early 1900s, more than 3,000 babies born to these couples were named Fred or Harvey or both, in honor of where their parents had met. A newspaper account from 1905 reported that the number of Harvey Girls going to the altar had created a severe shortage in waitstaff at Harvey houses along the Santa Fe line. One story from 1898 illustrates the pattern perfectly. Mabel, a Harvey Girl working at the Casa del Desierto house, served coffee to a customer named Homer Pike, a frugal farmer in his late 40s from Hamilton, Montana. Homer was known for doing his own cooking, mending his own clothes, spending almost nothing on himself. He'd shown no interest in women or marriage for years, but when Mabel brought him coffee, something changed. They exchanged pleasantries. After 3 days, Homer dared to ask Mabel to take a walk with him. She agreed. 2 days later, they decided to marry. Mabel resigned her position, relocated to Montana, and spent the rest of her life with Homer, who suddenly became quite generous, showering her with affection and things his money could buy. The impact of Harvey Girls on Western settlement cannot be overstated. When they arrived in frontier towns, they brought more than just efficient table service. They brought culture, refinement, civility. They organized church choirs and community stage productions. They participated in civic activities. They spoke out for law and order. They became school teachers, business owners, community leaders. The women who stayed and married tended to marry men of high standing in their communities. They became the most capable, most respected women in those towns, the ones running social organizations, improving schools, establishing libraries, pushing for better civic infrastructure. Will Rogers, the famous cowboy philosopher and humorist, recognized their contribution with characteristic wit. In the early days, the traveler fed on the buffalo. For doing so, the buffalo got his picture on the nickel. Well, Fred Harvey should have his picture on one side of the dime and one of his waitresses with her arms full of delicious ham and eggs on the other side, because they have kept the West supplied with food and wives. By the time Fred Harvey died in 1901, his empire included 47 restaurants, 15 hotels, and 30 dining cars operating in 12 states. His sons and grandsons continued the business, expanding operations to include newsstands, gift shops, even Indian art galleries at Harvey houses. The company marketed Fred Harvey branded goods: hats, shirts, shaving cream, candy, playing cards, even Harvey Special Blend whiskey. They created Indian detours, guided tours into Native American communities that pioneered cultural tourism in the Southwest. At its peak, there were 84 Harvey houses stretching from Chicago to Los Angeles, employing thousands of people, half of them women. The Fred Harvey Company had become the 6th largest food retailer in the United States. The Harvey Girls continued serving through the Great Depression, adapting as the economy collapsed around them. They served with renewed purpose during World War II, when Harvey houses reopened to serve soldiers traveling on troop trains. At La Posada in Winslow, Arizona, Harvey Girls served meals to 3,000 soldiers daily. Many of the women worked extraordinary hours, driven by patriotism and the knowledge that for many soldiers, a Harvey Girls smile and a hot meal might be their last taste of kindness before shipping overseas. But after the war, the era of the Harvey Girls was ending. Passenger rail travel declined as automobiles and airplanes became more popular. The interstate highway system drew travelers away from train routes. One by one, Harvey houses closed. Some were demolished. Others were converted to offices or civic centers. A few were preserved as museums. The last Harvey houses closed in the 1950s, though the Fred Harvey Company continued in other forms until 1968, when it was sold to AmFac, now Xanterra Parks and Resorts. A few Harvey House properties still operate today: La Posada in Winslow, Arizona, and El Tovar at the Grand Canyon remain as premier hotels, preserving the Harvey legacy today. Volunteer groups of former Harvey Girls and their descendants give tours, host exhibits, and keep the stories alive. The Harvey House Museum in Florence, Kansas, housed in the very first Harvey House Hotel from 1878, still serves meals and offers tours featuring Harvey Girl guides. Looking back, it's tempting to romanticize the Harvey Girls. The 1946 MGM musical with Judy Garland certainly did, painting them as cheerful heroines, civilizing the frontier with good manners and apple pie. But the reality was more complex and more impressive. These were young women, many barely out of their teens, who left everything familiar to work grueling hours in isolated towns. They endured homesickness, exhaustion, difficult customers, harsh frontier conditions. They faced the same dangers everyone on the frontier faced: disease, isolation, the unpredictability of life in places where law and order were still being established. What's remarkable isn't that they civilized the West through good manners. What's remarkable is that they saw an opportunity for independence and they took it. At a time when women's options were profoundly limited, when most were expected to remain at home until marriage, when working outside the home carried social stigma, these 100,000 women said yes to adventure. They weren't saints. They weren't martyrs. They were waitresses. As one dismissive critic put it, after all, only waitresses. But in being waitresses, they became something more. They became economic agents in their own lives. They became travelers and adventurers. They became community builders and pioneers. They proved that women could work professionally, maintain respectability, support themselves financially, and choose their own futures. They demonstrated that women belonged in the public sphere, in businesses, in the infrastructure of frontier development. They showed that women's work, even only waitressing, mattered profoundly in the building of the American West. And they did it while serving 4-course meals in under 30 minutes, maintaining 10 o'clock curfews, wearing uniforms with skirts exactly 8 inches from the floor, and never ever chewing gum. The Harvey Girls, 100,000 strong, 50,000 marriages, countless communities transformed, a model of professional service that influenced American hospitality for generations. They kept the West supplied with food and wives, as Will Rogers said. But more than that, they kept the West supplied with proof that women's ambitions, women's labor, and women's choices could shape the future of a nation. The next time you're in a restaurant, any restaurant, and you see professional service, think of Fred Harvey and his rigorous standards. Think of those brass gongs announcing arriving trains. Think of the cup code and the starched white aprons and the women who woke at dawn to set perfect tables. Think of young women boarding trains east to west, leaving home with 24 hours notice, traveling to towns they'd never heard of, ready to serve meals and build lives in the Wild West. The Harvey Girls. They weren't just waitresses, they were the women who opened the West.